Good evening. Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for those who are joining us from live stream. My name is David Dustin. I'm the principal at Jaffrey Ridge Middle School, and I'm happy to welcome everybody to tonight's Jaffrey Ridge Middle School Math Information Grading Night. I will take very little, in fact, no credit at all for tonight's presentation, except that I provide a lot of support, and I'm really excited to have our teachers sharing with you their wonderful ideas and steps for moving forward. And I'll also say that what's being presented tonight is a really large step in the direction that our district has been moving. And this group of courageous teachers to my left, it was completely coincidental that they're sitting on my left and we'll be sitting over here, but they've done a wonderful job moving us forward by taking that leap of faith with what they're doing, but also planning carefully and doing their homework to make sure that that leap of faith lands on solid ground and supports our kids. So I'm extremely proud of them, really grateful for the work they're doing, and happy to turn it over to them for most of tonight's presentation. We'll start with Mrs. Dibble.
All right, so I was in charge of making this a teensy-bit interactive. So I've got a little bit of an entrance ticket for you guys. All right, oh, there's an agenda. So we're gonna start with the entrance ticket. We heard a wonderful welcome from Mr. Dustin. Ruben Duncan will talk about the vision and the why behind all of this. We'll talk about some current roadblocks with Heather Schulman, and then we will get to hear from the middle school math teachers with Vince Bradley, Taylor Furtado, Lynn Angove, talking about moving forward in our plan, and we'll have a brief period of questions. Now time for the entrance ticket. Woo. Okay, I'm a high school math teacher, so I'm here as kind of a content specialist and to support these awesome teachers in their way. So we've got a quick question for you guys. All right, so there's two questions on your screen / behind me here. All right, and I want you guys to just take a guess. What do you think the proficiency levels would be? They are different for each question. Okay, so one would be if they do this, they're still below proficiency. 2 would be they're getting close to proficiency. 3 is hitting the mark. Yes, they're proficient. 4 would be they are advanced. So let's take a peek at the one that says, what is the rate of change of the function? So anyone want to take a guess? 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, I see some hands there. Nice, yeah. All right. Mr. Handy, would you mind? It is a level 1. I know, it's a little shocking, right? All right, well, let's look at simplify the product, right? That's looking at 2 expressions in scientific notation. What do you think about that one? 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, Mr. Handy, you want to try? All right, Mr. Dustin, nice, I saw that. You were pretty pumped about that. All right, let's try a couple more. All right, so these look a little bit different. Let's talk about explain the significance of exponents when looking for a linear function. All right, it's a little bit different. When you think, oh yeah, there we go. Okay. Oh, nice. We're getting closer here. Mr. Hand, you want to try it? It is a 4. Nice. So I saw one answer. I saw other people were close. That's awesome. And then lastly, write an example of systems of equations with infinite solutions and solve your systems to verify your answer. What do we think? See some 3s out there. Ooh, Dustin's going with a 4. We got a 4. Mr. Handy. Oh, it is a 3. I saw 2 right answers. That's improvement. All right, cool. So thank you guys. So this is really to segue into what do the proficiency levels mean and how do we help our students meet them?
So why have tonight? Why talk about mathematics? Matter of fact, if many of these individuals right here would ask their students why, some people might say, oh, just because we have to learn math. Other learners will say, and their parents will say, I'm not really good at mathematics. It's not something I really get. Like I used to be good at it like in 3rd grade when we did adding and subtracting and multiplying, but once we get to division, I just wasn't good after that. And I hear that a lot from people in our society. And it's interesting. You go up to a person and have a conversation about learning, and they don't typically say, I'm really not a reader. or I can't write. Yeah, you hear that maybe a little bit more about the I can't write, but still, no one would really go out and brag about I'm having a difficult time reading if they, or I can't read. But when we talk about mathematics, we hear sometimes or often, once again, like almost with a smile, "Well, I'm just not good at it," and we just pass it on. Only in the United States do we have that issue, I guess you could say. And so we don't want that here in the Jaffrey Ringe Cooperative School District. So here we want excellence. So the why, if we could go to the next slide, is because all learners deserve excellence all of the time. And that means that goes way beyond mathematics, but it includes mathematics and mathematical thinking and learning. And so what that means in the case of tonight's conversation and here at the Jaffrey Ringe Middle School is that our school needs to respect all learners and their families by ensuring that all learners are provided with high quality, research-based instruction, are held to high expectations, and receive accurate feedback to support their continued learning and development. We're going to talk about high expectations, research-based instruction, and that accurate feedback tonight. The current roadblocks, why? The why continues. And we're going to take a look at some of the data. I'll talk about a couple slides, and Ms. Schulman will come up and talk about one or two as well. This is a matrix with grade 3 through 8 New Hampshire state assessment data. Now, I did not include the 1920 school year for a lot of reasons. I didn't want to say, well, it was a COVID year, we had a down year or anything of that nature. Actually, our data looks very similar to kind of some of this information right here during that time frame. We can see that in 2014-15, there was probably an easier test in the state of New Hampshire called the kneecap. Some of those questions that we had or some of those concepts that were shown earlier tonight wouldn't even be on the kneecap. 2015-16, 16-17, the testing shifted over to something called the Smarter Balanced Assessment, a little more rigorous assessment, also computer-based. And then the last couple years, last 3 years, we've had what's called the New Hampshire SAS, or the state assessment, very similar to that Smarter Balanced Assessment, but through New Hampshire with a little more control, local control to our state. And that also is performed on a computer, a Chromebook, or a laptop. And we can see that in the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade years, we don't go in the direction that we want to go during this time. Granted, there are a lot of changes that take place with our learners during 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, 9th grade really as well. But it is a time actually because of during that time of change, there's a lot more capacity to learn. It's during this time that students learn the habits that they have for the rest of their lives, good habits and not so good habits. And it's our goal here to take some of these trends and flip them in the opposite direction, provide our learners good mental habits, good study habits, good understanding of the world around them. This next slide is something of a similar picture. The previous slide was of the same cohort going from 3rd grade to 4th grade to 5th grade to 6th grade and so forth onward. This is looking at different cohorts. So for instance, the 7th grade this year would be an 8th grade next year. And so you'll be comparing a different 7th grade group to this current 7th grade group for next year if we were to look at in this model. But you can see as well that grade 6, it starts to go down over a course of time. and 7th grade as well. And then 8th grade inevitably goes quite a bit in that direction, the direction exactly the opposite of what we'd want to see. Now, if we look at the next slide, this is another way of looking at it. You can see over to the left that the high school, they do a great job at our high school. Our learners improve the next time they take an assessment. And it's been a couple years since that 8th grade at this point when CHS would take the assessment. But you can also see that in that middle category, that middle line, the median there, that the middle school tends to, on average, have the lowest of those averages. 1 being below proficient, 2 being developing or approaching proficiency, and where we want them to be is closer to where you see RMS and JGS have their learners at that 3 stage, that proficient area. And the above line means that we have individuals reaching that 4 category as well, but not to the degree that we would like to. But as Ms. Schulman will say, or give you a little bit of an understanding in this next slide, we don't necessarily always communicate that to our learners or to their parents.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. So looking and considering our downward trend with the middle school math performance, we really started thinking we are on the cusp of ending our dramatic COVID year last year, although we're still embedded in it, but we thought we really need to put that aside and focus on our learners' achievement. So we looked at our SAS results for this past June. The middle level learners, grades 6 through 8, in person and remote, had the opportunity to take this assessment, computerized, and the combined results are out of the 200 something plus kids, 8 of our learners in combined grades 6, 7, and 8, a total of 8 scored at the above proficiency level. That was really hard to swallow. So we started thinking, well, but the kids seem to be doing okay in the classroom. Report cards seem okay. We looked at that data point. So I looked at all of the final grade report for grades 6, 7, 8, again, in person and remote for last year. 78 of our combined learners scored the equivalency of A would be highly proficient, highly effective. And that really stood out as a real discrepancy. And at that point, we invited our middle school math team. And I must make a disclaimer that not all of our current math teachers taught during this year, these students. We brought them in this summer and said, hey, take a look at the data. What do you think? And they spent several days this summer examining test questions, learner results, really delving into the data to see if we could find some patterns. And at this point, I would like to turn it over to our math teachers. Thank you, Mr. Pratt.
Hi, I'm Vince Pratt. I'm teaching 7th grade this year. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what we did this summer and where we're going into the future. So go ahead, please. Thank you. So we started, or honestly, this was probably after a full week of hard work, was starting to look at what our goals are going to be. One of our goals was that we wanted to align our taught curriculum, what we expect our kids to be learning, to what the state was expecting us to be teaching. So we looked at the standards, we looked at the assessments, we looked at the curriculum that the state expected us to be teaching, and we made our school's curriculum match that. There's still some work to do with that as far as some of the detail work. It's kind of a living document at this point, but a lot of that grunt work has been done this summer. Moving on to goal 2, we are looking at results. when we start looking at the idea that 78 students can earn an A, but only 8 of them can be proficient or highly proficient, that's a discrepancy that we don't consider fully honest. And so we want to have our grades have integrity. And so a part of that is aligning our end of year summative grades to match the state assessments grades. We understand that there's always going to be some wiggle room. Some kids have bad days, some kids have excellent days. One test doesn't decide everything. So there's that 80% number, is it doesn't make sense for it to be 100%, but it should be reasonably close. The final goal isn't just that reporting is going to be more honest and with integrity, but it's also going to improve is our final goal. We don't want to just have grades that represent something. We want to teach the kids. We want them to grow. We want them to be proficient. We want them to be ready for high school. And so we have several learning targets that honestly are pretty aggressive. As far as what we're hoping to achieve this year. We're hoping that 40% of the students will be proficient or above, and increase that number by 5% each year for the next 3 years and possibly beyond. But 3 years is a far enough outlook at this point to make a noticeable change. Awesome. So in reworking and rewriting our progressions and writing them so that they more represented our goals, a lot of it required us flushing them out, putting detail into our learning progressions that hadn't been there previously, really looking at what the state assessments and the state was saying the goals are. So this just happens to be one example. This happens to be a 6th grade learning goal. And so learner is skilled at fluently using arithmetic with multi-digit decimals. And you can see as you look through this emerging, developing, proficient, and advanced, they're very spelled out as far as students can do these things and they're proficient, or they can't and they're not. There's not a whole lot of wiggle room. There's not a whole lot of interpretation. Students are going to have these skills or they're not, and the grades are going to reflect that. And our goal as teachers is to bring as many students as we can to that 3 and 4 level, because we want our kids to succeed. So this is just one of those examples, and these learning documents are going to be published on the website. So anybody that wanted to look at the curriculum would have access to do so. Please. This is an example of a document that is still currently in the works. These are the I can statements. So as we look at that curriculum, this is unpacking that document. So looking at what does it mean to be proficient? And so this example here doesn't align exactly with the one that we were just looking at. But you can see that we will be doing further work on our curriculum, and it's going to have a lot of detail and examples and taxonomy that's built into this that allows us to have a really robust curriculum that really represents what the school's goals are, which is high achievement, excellence for our students. So this is a more generalized explanation of what any of these learning goals might look like. So a learner is skilled at something. And so for them to be at a 1, they're gaining understanding about it at the concept or skill. At a level 2, the understanding is starting to be applied, but they might need support, help, or it's at a limited level. At a level 3, they're using these skills. They're using it correctly, consistently, and independently. And then at a level 4, they're addressing real world situations. They're expanding, investigating, taking something and creating something new out of it. So it's really a high level of thinking and understanding that we're expecting out of a level 4 student. So more specifically, we've got a huge curriculum that we've rewritten. We've looked at a lot of it. And so one of the major resources that we're using is the Engage New York Eureka programs. It's not 100% aligned with what we're doing, but it's a good curriculum for us to use. And we're going to supplement and adjust things as we feel necessary. But this kind of gives you an idea of the whole year. For middle school, 6th grade, starting with ratios and unit rates. 7th grade starts with ratios and proportions. 8th grade starts with exponents and scientific notation. And you can see the whole year really is packed full with a lot of information and a lot of knowledge that they're going to accumulate and gain. And each year builds on the previous. You can see equations and expressions repeatedly showing up. First, it's introduced in the 6th grade, then it's more solidified into 7th grade. And then they're really using it in solving and working with linear equations in 8th grade. So this idea that we're laying the foundations in 6th grade and we're going to build that up through 7th and 8th grade so that they're really ready to start high school at a level that they should be. As I said, we're using the Engage New York curriculum as our primary resource. There's a lot of other resources that we're using. Part of the reason why we're using the Engage New York resources is because we're also eliminating the use of disposable textbooks. The idea behind textbooks is they're outdated 5 to 6 years after you get them anyway. Engage New York is kind of a living document in that they continue to revise it, and it's free and accessible online. What you can see here is a public website. It's a link of it at least, where you can actually see the student version and the teacher version of all the resources here. So when you're sitting at home and you're looking at this going, what is my kid working on, or what are they going to be doing next? These resources are available to you to access, as well as some other websites that I'll talk about. You can see that there's within this website, if you do a little bit of digging around, there's a parent and family page over on the right-hand side here, and you can see that there's a lot of fluency support, and you can look at a lot of these downloadable resources so that if you want to supplement what's happening in the classroom at home, you'll have those resources as well. In addition to using Engage New York, we're using Kami to make the use of the Engage New York curriculum more streamlined, more accessible, and more relatable to the way they're going to be assessed when it comes down to the New Hampshire SAS and other assessments that are moving more and more computerized. The Kami software has really a robust set of tools. It allows for video, voice, and screen capture comments. It allows the text to be read to the students for those students that reading isn't a strength, but they still need to be able to access the material. These are tools that can probably be transferred to other disciplines fairly easily, but we use these tools to allow us to avoid printing hundreds and hundreds of pages of worksheets or the Eureka curriculum. And so it's all embedded in that way. So it's a nice tool. For those of you that understand, it's a PDF annotator is the shorthand of saying what it is.
So reporting out wise, there's going to be some adjustments to support aligning and meeting the goals that the math team laid out for themselves. The biggest change will be the use of the web to school standards-based module, which basically will look a little bit different on report cards just for the math classes. And there's a little example here to sort of show what we have in mind and why we're going this route. You'll see for each math skill set on the report card, that same 1 to 4 scale will be demonstrated with the median score that the learner has earned in that skill set. So if a learner takes multiple assessments, or if that skill spirals into another piece of math later down the course and is assessed again, the teacher will continue to input those grades into the system, and it will always report out the median assessment score for that skill set. And the rationale for that is the parachute packing example shown on the screen. You know, our traditional way of just sort of doing the average of all grades means you could have a learner who once in a while does okay, in this case with packing a parachute, so their average looks okay, but even towards the end of their work shift or the end of the course, their skill set might drop and their average stays high because of the scores all being blended together. On the flip side, you might have the learner shown in Packer 3, who's packing parachutes, who progressively gets better and better. And by the end of the time that they're packing parachutes, you sort of know the quality because you've seen that growth over a period of time. The question becomes, which parachute packer would you want if you were relying on the work that they did? Would you want parachute packer 1, who might be your traditional average? Would you want parachute packer 2, who might be the median and has that jumping up and down? Would you want parachute packer 3? I suppose that might be a decaying average that we see on that one. Our goal is to make sure that the information being reported is always the most accurate for the learner's combined skill set. And that's what this tool will allow us to do. We are very conscious of the fact that honor roll is an important marker for learners in middle and high school. And so we have thought carefully about how to make sure that this change in reporting, which again will only affect the math classes, does not change a learner's ability to be on the honor roll if they've earned that. So there's no change to honor roll criteria for all other courses. It remains exactly as printed in our program of studies. And in fact, we thought it was important to keep true to that even for the math classes. So all of our courses that are assessing on a 1 to 4 system, but placing the traditional 0 to 100 scale into the gradebook, are currently using a translation, which roughly allows for a 2.7 to still allow honors. We obviously had to make an adjustment because we're using median. So we're going to go with a score of 2.5 for honors in the math courses and 3.0 for high honors, which again is very close to the actual grades that would be required in the traditional grading system. And again, just to emphasize, the goal of this change in our grading system is to make sure that our math teachers who are doing this work to come up with the can-do statements that align with the curriculum, who are trying to help our learners have those opportunities to progress and ensure that they can build upon their math skills with true knowledge, that 0 to 100 tool just wasn't going to allow for that work to happen. So the goal of this reporting mechanism is to make sure that on each skill, each learner and each set of families knows exactly what their learner is thriving at and exactly the areas where they're still needing some growth. And we're excited that this system is going to give that data to our math team so they can continue finding the right interventions, the right types of instructional support tools, and the right types of other help to make sure our learners are getting the things that they need. So again, I applaud you for taking this leap out there and for the work you've done to do this background work. And at this time, we're happy to take any questions that folks may have about either the math development in the middle school or the adjustment to our grading and reporting for that course.
So just as a point to those who are in the online audience, if you would like to have a question posed, you can do so in one of two ways. You can do that by using the hand raise feature, which would be at the bottom of your screen. Then we could acknowledge you from there. Or if you want, you could put something into the chat and we could just read it out loud. So either of those options are okay. Then obviously anybody in person, I do have a microphone. If you want voice amplification to be heard, just raise your hand and I'm happy to bring it over.
With the online textbook, can you talk a little bit about what a day looks like for a 6th grade, 7th grade? How do you utilize the curriculum with that, and what does it actually look like for the kids?
Okay, I can answer that. I'm Lynn Angove. I teach the 8th grade math. I was with the students last year for 7th grade. So there's a huge change for us as our learners because we didn't use the technology in our classroom. So I just tell the students that we're learning. We gotta all have grace for each other. We gotta have patience. So with the CAMI, what we do is every day, whatever lesson we're on, it's in their Google Classroom. They have directions to upload it into their CAMI. So with the CAMI, they will open it up and they can take their notes right there on it. They'll have this equation format where they can put whatever they need to. I always tell the students, it's their notes. I don't know what works best for them. It's what works best. They have to do what works best for them. I'm not going to dictate. They are getting ready for high school, so I back off a little bit. And I believe, I'm not sure if they're going to use it in high school or not, but some teachers may, some teachers may not. But it is a tool. So they just upload it on and I'm teaching with them. I'm learning how to get the notes on there as well, but they have their own set of notes. And then when we're done with our lesson and we finish our progression, which we just finished, so if you bear with me, pretty soon, the next day or two, you will see that 1 to 4 grading scale on for the 8th graders because we finished a progression. I have a day where students at the end of the progression, they are allowed to transfer any type of notes that they need to into a notebook because they have a summative and they're allowed to use their notes for that, but they will not have access to the CAMI. So we talk about what type of good note taking to add down to that as well. But again, we just did this, so we are kind of problem solving on what we need to do. But I'm not sure if I answered exactly your question. I'm not gonna lie, I'm a bit nervous because I don't see an audience, so I'm not quite sure. So re-ask if you need to. Did that answer or no? Mhm. Yes. So I fit is I'm doing the work on the board and they're taking the note taking onto the CAMI. So as if they were in like a book, they would be writing it down. Yep, well, we skip around with the examples. It's whatever. I feel like if we understand where we're going with it, we don't have to do all the examples. It's just the ones that I feel have the meat of it. And then we just move on. There's times where we do lots of examples and we might just do 2 or 3 depending. So I hope that answers. No, I think we do that straight through the board for 6th and 8th and even high school. We don't do all the examples because if we don't need to do all that examples and all of that practice, if the students understand it and they have it, we're going to move on.
Some of it's investigation, some of it is exploratory in nature. So the curriculum tries to mix things up. And as I said, the curriculum doesn't meet our needs wholly on its own. And that we do supplement, and we know that kind of going in, that there are parts of this that we're going to have to adjust. Some parts are going to get trimmed, some parts are going to get supplemented completely. And there might be sections that we just kind of take a full step back from and say, no, we have a better tool to do this job. Because we're not necessarily saying that Eureka is the way. Our goals are kind of what we've set, what we've worked on this summer, our learning progressions, our goals for learning. And Eureka is just one of many tools that we're using to kind of bring our students along.
And I've used the Engaged New York since this is my 3rd year. I've used it from day 1. And I have noticed that there's rigor, there's challenging questions. So there is an expectation in it. And I try to tell students it's okay to be challenged. That's how we learn. We also learn by what didn't work so well, what we didn't understand, what we don't know. So it's okay to get things wrong because we didn't know. So we just move on. As I tell my students that we have to have patience, we have to have grace, and it's okay to make a mistake because that's the only way that we're going to learn. And if they do not do well on something, it's okay. The worst case scenario is we do it again. It's not that bad. So as we took the summative today, I had a few students that were upset and I said, what's the worst case scenario? They said, I have to do it again. I said, that's all. So we'll be talking about office hours. It's very important that they are in office hours. They're asking questions. We can redo things and we can go over things. And if I have a group of students that are struggling, they will be in those office hours and we'll go over that skill. Because that is what's needed. And we don't move unless we're in a good spot to continue. Any other questions?
All right, again, just a reminder for anybody who is remote, 2 ways that you can make a comment or a question rather. You could use the chat feature or you could raise your hand with the option at the bottom of the screen. Hello, hello.
So just as a parent, I want to clarify how I know what my student needs to do for assignments, because I think I'm still getting Google Classroom updates like less problem 7.1 is due, potentially overdue. I've asked about it. I've been told that it's going to be done in class. And I know some of the reporting is on Web to School. And I think I saw like there's meeting, not yet meeting in terms of the progression. But just making sure that how do I know when there's something that needs to be done for me to follow up on? That's the way to know that.
Oh, wait. It's okay. All right, so Google Classroom is our primary tool for getting our work to our students, for them turning their work into us. So that is our primary learning management system, is the fancy words for it. And so that's what we're using to kind of organize our classroom and our classroom work. Final scores then get moved over to Web to School. There's a little bit of a delay in that because it's migrating one system to another. And moving over only the things that are notable as far as those grades go. There will be formatives in Web to School as well as the summatives. The summatives are the only pieces that go towards that end of your calculation as far as that 1, 2, 3, 4. The formatives are the practices, whether they're the homeworks or the classwork, that allow us to kind of let the kids know you're getting it, you're not getting it, which is kind of the idea behind reducing those numbers down to it's either met or it's not met. Either they're succeeding or they need more practice. Having the 100-point scale starts to get confusing. Oh, I got a 68. Oh, you got a 69. What did you do 1% better than I did? What does that even mean? So either they're having success, at which point we put it in the met, or they need more practice, they need to do it again, at which point it's a not met. And so if there's anything in there that I would say is a not met, I'd say that that's something that you should probably be redoing prior to a summative. Because if you can't do it in practice, I don't know why you'd expect to be able to do it when it really counts. Did that answer the question effectively? Would you, I can clarify some more. So there are due dates. As far as due dates go, really the point of them is just to encourage them to get things done in a reasonable time frame. As far as overdue things, I'd rather them get done than worry about whether they were done yesterday or today. The goal is practice. The goal is that they know it at the end of the year, not yesterday. So when things show up and they're like overdue, it's like, oh, I'm not going to do it because it's late. No, do it anyway. It doesn't change whether it's mastered or not. It doesn't change those types of calculations. It just means that maybe you were a day slower than somebody else, or maybe you needed extra help and you had to wait for office hours to get it done. So we have tools. We have the Wellness Academic Center, which meets after school. We have office hours that meets 3 days a week. I mean, we have 120 kids trying to squeeze into spots for 60. So there is a limited number that can kind of meet on a weekly basis. But we are looking at trying to supplement the teacher resources that we have with high school tutors coming down to the middle school, and looking at other creative solutions to help us meet these challenging goals.
One more thing about the Google Classroom. I know that some of us, the way that we set up our Google Classroom, we do it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, so that if you wanted to take a look at what they're doing for the week, you can go to what they did today. And I know for myself, I keep it that entire week so that even on Friday, they can go back to what was done on Monday and complete everything or figure out what they had missed. I know that for a lot of the students, if they're not there that day, they still want their assignments. So they can go back to the day that they weren't there and complete the assignment or look at the notes from that day. And then everything will still be in there. For mine, for the 6th grade, it goes underneath the module that we're working on through the Eureka. So it'll say it and it goes in the chronological order. So they're still able to look at it and it has the dates, so they can look back at what they had missed.
All right, and I don't have anything from the digital audience, so.
All right, well. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. Obviously, we're going to continue to support any families that have questions or learners that have questions. You should look to see the Web to School half of this coming live within the next couple of weeks. So you'll be able to start to monitor those 1 to 4 summative grades in that system. And as that happens, if you have any questions, we encourage any families to reach out to the teachers first. They're always the first best resource for what goes on in their classroom, but certainly any administration or counseling center staff are happy to help as well. Again, thank you, math teachers, for taking a close look at the data, for being professionally vulnerable together, and for taking a leap to fix a problem that you identified. We really appreciate all that hard work. And thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight, digitally or in person. Have a great evening.